The peaceful colony of Gyris was a shining example of human progress, a world where diverse people came together to build a new life among the stars. It was a place where families thrived, children played under the light of twin suns, and the promise of a future filled with hope seemed endless. But that dream was shattered without warning. One fateful morning, the sky turned dark with the approach of the Vrothians, a race of technologically advanced aliens whose motives remained unclear. The colony's defense systems had been crippled years before when the Council deemed them unnecessary. The Vrothians struck swiftly, their ships descending like locusts. They overwhelmed the colony's defenses with ease. Their weapons ripped through the atmosphere and reduced entire cities to rubble within moments. Civilians scattered in panic. The colony's leadership had no plan, no defense, no escape route. They were utterly unprepared. The first wave of destruction was unlike anything anyone had seen. The air was filled with fire and screams. The ground shook as the alien ships unleashed their full might. Humanity's once peaceful outpost now burned in a way that no one had anticipated. The invasion was so fast that there was no time for communication with the rest of the human worlds. The messages of distress sent from Gyris were cut off by the overwhelming barrage. The Vrothians made their presence known not through communication, but through total annihilation. Their ships were massive and terrifying, a testament to their technological superiority. They moved with ruthless precision, their weapons striking with surgical accuracy, as if they had been hunting for this very moment. All over the colony, thousands perished without even understanding why the Vrothians had attacked. They had come and left without offering an explanation, their ships vanishing as quickly as they had arrived, and leaving nothing behind but death and ruin. It was only later that the truth came to light. The Vrothians had been watching humanity for decades. Their initial research had been about observation and curiosity, but the curiosity quickly turned to disdain. They saw humanity as weak and primitive, unworthy of the stars. The destruction of Gyris was not a random act of violence. It was a calculated strike designed to break the spirit of humanity, to show them their place in the universe. The colonies across human space were filled with horror when the news spread. Shockwaves of grief and anger rippled through every corner of the human race. They could not believe it at first. Many questioned the reports, but the images of Gyris burned into the minds of all who saw them. The innocent lives lost, the peaceful world transformed into a graveyard. It was then that humanity united. The leaders of Earth and the colonies came together in a way they had never done before. There were no more debates over politics, no more conflicts over resources, only the cold realization that something had to be done. Humanity would not let this act of genocide define them. This was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. It was time for humanity to rise from the ashes of Gyris and strike back at the forces that sought to crush them. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not a race to be ignored. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would not rest until their revenge was claimed. In the wake of Gyris's destruction, humanity stood at a crossroads. The shock of the attack was overwhelming, but something else was stirring beneath the surface. Anger and grief began to twist into a singular drive for survival. Earth's leaders convened in secret to devise a plan to ensure that humanity would never again be caught off guard like this. The colony had been unprepared, and now a collective effort was underway to ensure it would never happen again. The council assembled was composed of military strategists, scientists, engineers, and civilians, each with their own role to play in humanity's survival. It was a diverse group, but the mission was clear. No one cared about politics or borders anymore, only how to fight back against the alien threat that had cost them so much. The plan they set in motion was audacious and ambitious. Humanity would assemble a fleet of 700,000 vessels, an armada larger than anything seen before in the history of the galaxy. The fleet would be built in secret in orbit around the moons of Mars, using every available resource from every human colony. The ships would be powered by cutting-edge technology, developed from the best minds humanity could offer. Each vessel would be a fortress in its own right, designed for both survival and destruction. It was not just the size of the fleet that made it formidable, but the ingenuity that had gone into creating it. They had learned from the mistakes of the past and made sure that this new fleet would be capable of adapting to whatever the Vrothians might throw at them. The humans who had once been farmers, doctors, teachers, and laborers now found themselves becoming soldiers and engineers. They worked tirelessly day and night, putting everything they had into the creation of the fleet. The first few months were a blur of activity. There were setbacks, of course, as with any massive project, but the sheer willpower of humanity drove them forward. Their ability to adapt and overcome obstacles was what made them so dangerous to their enemies. Every setback only made them more determined to succeed. Meanwhile, the Vrothians were unaware of what was coming. They were too consumed with their apparent victory to worry about anything other than their next conquest. They thought they had broken humanity's spirit, but they could not have been more wrong. While the Vrothians were focused on expansion, the humans were secretly building an empire of their own, one that would strike back when the time was right. Once the fleet was fully assembled, there would be no turning back. Humanity would take the fight to the Vrothians on their terms, and in their home territory. No longer would they be passive targets waiting to be picked off like easy prey. The humans would become the hunters, and the Vrothians the hunted. The council knew that their time to strike was fast approaching, but they were also aware that the fleet had to be ready. Every ship had to be tested and perfected, and every commander had to be trained in the brutal realities of war that lay ahead. But there was no time to waste. With each passing day, the Vrothians were expanding their reach further into the galaxy. Their invasion was far from over, and humanity had only one chance to stop them. The stage was set. The first steps of humanity's retaliation were almost complete. The galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before, an unstoppable force rising from the ashes of destruction, ready to challenge the greatest power it had ever known. As the human fleet assembled in secret, it became clear that the battle ahead would be unlike any humanity had ever faced. The Vrothians might have thought their victory over Jairus was a final statement, but they were wrong. Humanity had awakened in a way no one could have predicted. The first wave of ships set out in deep space, traveling through uncharted areas where the Vrothians would least expect them to strike. The fleet was divided into smaller groups, designed to move with agility and surprise in mind. Each captain was a seasoned commander, yet every human knew the risk of what they were about to do. The Vrothians, still underestimating the human race, continued their expansion throughout the galaxy. Their commanders believed that humanity had been broken by the destruction of Jairus, that the human spirit would never rise again. But as the human fleet made its way toward enemy space, the truth was revealed. Humanity's strength wasn't in their technology alone, but in their adaptability. They moved quickly, attacking with precision where the enemy least expected it, cutting off the Vrothians' vital supply lines and communication networks. The human ships were equipped with cloaking devices and stealth technology, allowing them to strike before the enemy could react. Every encounter was calculated, with human ships emerging from the shadows to disable enemy vessels before disappearing back into the darkness of space. With each strike, the Vrothians began to question whether they had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back. It was guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, and the Vrothians were struggling to keep up. The humans didn't just aim to defeat the Vrothians militarily, but to cripple their confidence and their will to fight. The initial skirmishes were small, but the message was clear. Humanity was not done yet. It was only a matter of time before the fleet would be ready for a full-scale confrontation. And when that time came, the Vrothians would be caught off guard. Back on Earth, the leaders of humanity watched anxiously as the fleet's first encounters unfolded. With each victory, their confidence grew. They knew they couldn't stop now, not when they had finally shown the Vrothians they were capable of fighting back. The fleet was slowly making its way closer to the heart of Vrothian space, and with each new success, humanity gained vital intelligence on the enemy. It wasn't just military superiority that was at play, but human ingenuity in action. The ships, designed by engineers who had once never imagined such a conflict, were constantly being modified to improve their performance. Tactics were devised and redevised after each battle. Learning from the mistakes of the previous engagements, humanity was evolving on the fly, becoming the most dangerous adversary the Vrothians had ever faced. Then came a breakthrough. Humanity had intercepted a transmission from a high-ranking Vrothian officer revealing vital information about their fleet's weaknesses, and more importantly, their communication hubs. These hubs were vulnerable to sabotage, and if the humans could disable them, it would throw the entire Vrothian command structure into chaos. The fleet was ready for its first major offensive, and the Vrothians had no idea what was coming. The humans knew the risk was high, but the opportunity to strike at the heart of the enemy's control was too great to pass up. They planned their next move with precision. Their ships would strike at the communication hubs in a series of lightning-fast raids, leaving the Vrothian command unable to respond quickly enough. It was a daring gamble, but humanity had learned that fortune favored the bold. Humanity's gamble paid off. The first wave of raids on the Vrothian communication hubs was a resounding success. The human fleet, now operating with perfect synchronization, moved swiftly through the chaos. They disabled key relay stations, severing the Vrothians' ability to coordinate their forces. The impact was immediate. The once unstoppable enemy fleet was now fractured and disoriented. The Vrothians, accustomed to controlling everything with ruthless efficiency, found themselves in disarray for the first time in decades. Their communications were reduced to a mess of broken signals and static. Their leaders struggled to regroup, but without the ability to communicate, they could not mount a cohesive defense. It was as if the very lifeblood of their war effort had been drained. The humans, sensing the shift in momentum, pressed their advantage with precision. Every battle was calculated with the utmost care. They attacked in waves, hitting vulnerable targets where the Vrothians were weakest. Their ships, designed for both offense and stealth, became shadows in the void, striking fast and vanishing before the enemy could retaliate. The once feared Vrothian warships, large and imposing, were now vulnerable to the human fleet's constant pressure. Each encounter revealed new weaknesses and cracks in the Vrothian armored. Humanity had learned from their first few skirmishes, and now they knew exactly where to strike to inflict maximum damage. Back on the human side, morale was at an all-time high. The fleet had tasted victory and wanted more. Every pilot, every soldier, and every officer knew that they were no longer just fighting for revenge. They were fighting for the future of their species, their homes, their families. The people of Juris had died so that humanity could stand tall again, and every victory felt like a step closer to ensuring their sacrifice was not in vain. In one particularly fierce battle, the human fleet struck at a Vrothian supply depot hidden in the asteroid field on the outskirts of a nearby star system. The battle was brutal, with both sides taking heavy losses, but the humans emerged victorious, cutting off an essential supply line that the Vrothians depended on to fuel their war effort. It was a symbolic victory, as well as a tactical one. The Vrothians were now feeling the weight of their earlier arrogance. As the weeks passed, the human fleet continued to disrupt the Vrothian war machine at every turn. With each victory, humanity gained valuable intelligence about their enemies' movements and weaknesses. The Vrothians' confidence, once overwhelming, began to wane, and doubt began to seep into their ranks. For the first time, their commanders questioned their superiority. The humans, meanwhile, had no intention of stopping. They knew the first few raids had been just the beginning. The time was fast approaching for the real assault to begin. A decisive blow had to be struck at the heart of the Vrothian war effort. If humanity was to truly secure its future, it was a race against time. As the human fleet prepared for its next phase, the stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of both species. The Vrothians, now aware of the human threat, were scrambling to fortify their defenses, but they were too late. Humanity was already closing in, and soon they would show the universe that the destruction of Juris had only ignited their will to fight. The tide of war had shifted in humanity's favor, but they knew they could not afford to relax. Not yet. The first waves of surprise strikes had worked, but the next step would be far more dangerous. The human fleet, emboldened by their successes, was now preparing for the decisive strike that would cripple the Vrothian war machine for good. The Vrothians, though disoriented, had begun to regroup. Their warlords assembled their remaining fleets. Determined not to let humanity's rebellion spread any further, they began to fortify their defenses around key strategic points, turning the galaxy into a battlefield. But no matter how strong their fortifications were, The human fleet had already learned how to break through the toughest of lines. Each captain in the human fleet knew the risks. Now the upcoming battles would not be fought in the shadows or through hit-and-run tactics. It was time for a direct confrontation. Humanity had gathered a massive force for this very moment, and with over 700,000 vessels, it was a force that no one could ignore. The humans took the fight to the heart of Rothian space, their first major target being a colossal Rothian stronghold located in the heart of the enemy's empire. The battle would be brutal, unlike anything the human fleet had faced before. The enemy was waiting for them, ready to defend their turf with everything they had. As the human fleet approached the stronghold, the scale of the challenge became clear to everyone. There were defenses everywhere, huge battle stations, bristling with weaponry, countless enemy ships waiting in the darkness of space for the signal to strike. But the humans were undeterred. They came at the stronghold from all sides, launching coordinated attacks that split the Rothian forces apart. They didn't care about the odds. They had faced worse and survived. They had learned that victory wasn't just about raw firepower, but about using tactics to break the enemy's will to fight. The human ships danced around the heavier, slower Rothian vessels, using their speed and advanced technology to outmaneuver their enemies with deadly precision. Every ship in the human fleet had its purpose. Every captain and pilot knew what they were fighting for, and as they tore through the Rothian defenses, they remembered the people of Gyrus who had died so that this moment could happen. The battle raged for hours, with each side taking heavy losses, but humanity kept pushing forward. Their fleet was relentless, pushing deeper into the heart of the stronghold, targeting weak points in the defenses and exploiting any gaps they could find. The Rothians, though still fierce in their retaliation, could feel the pressure mounting. Their ships began to falter as they struggled to keep up with the lightning-fast human tactics. Inside the Rothian command center, panic began to spread. Their leaders scrambled to make sense of the chaos. Humanity's attacks were unpredictable and effective, leaving the once proud Rothian warlords in a state of confusion. They had never faced an enemy like this before. The human fleet, ever adaptive, found a new weakness in the Rothian stronghold's power core, and within moments they launched a coordinated strike, targeting the heart of the enemy's defenses. It was a move that would change the course of the battle, and it would make the universe realize just how dangerous humanity could be when pushed too far. The explosion was colossal, sending shockwaves through the Rothian stronghold as the heart of their command structure was torn apart. It was a victory unlike any before, and as the human fleet withdrew from the battlefield, the victory was theirs, but the war was far from over. The message was clear, though. Humanity was no longer a species to be underestimated, and the Rothians had learned it the hard way. The victory at the Rothian stronghold sent shockwaves across the galaxy, but the war was far from over. Humanity had proved they were not to be underestimated. But the Rothians were not a race that gave up easily. They had been wounded, yes, but they were not broken yet. In the aftermath of the battle, the human fleet regrouped, licking its wounds and preparing for the next phase of the war. Each ship in the fleet had taken damage, and many soldiers had fallen in the intense conflict, but humanity was resilient, and they knew what they were fighting for. The survivors carried the memory of those lost in the battle, knowing that each sacrifice brought them one step closer to victory. The Rothians, despite their losses, were regrouping as well. They had begun to adapt to the human tactics and were quickly fortifying their positions throughout the galaxy. They knew the next human assault would come soon, and they were determined not to be caught off guard again. The human leadership understood that the battle was no longer just about a single victory or defeat. It was about ensuring the survival of the entire species. The stakes had never been higher as humanity's fleet navigated through the vast expanse of space. They realized that the time had come for the final push to end the war once and for all on Earth. The people waited anxiously for news. Their world had been spared from the ravages of war for the most part, but the memories of the destruction of Gyrus still burned in their minds. They had watched from afar as humanity's forces took the fight to the Rothians, and now they were eager for the end to come. The leaders of the human colonies shared a similar sentiment. They had all witnessed firsthand the brutality of the Vrothians and their ability to wipe out entire populations without mercy. The Vrothians had made it clear that they saw humanity as nothing more than an obstacle to their own domination. The time for diplomacy had passed, and now the only path left was through war. The next target was a Vrothian command center located deep within enemy territory. The intelligence gathered by humanity over the past few months revealed that this base was the key to their entire military operation. If it could be destroyed, it would cripple the Vrothian ability to wage war at full capacity. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, began its journey toward this final stronghold. The Vrothians, unaware of the imminent threat, continued to bolster their defenses, confident in their ability to withstand any attack, but they had underestimated humanity once again. The fleet, now more coordinated than ever, prepared for the most dangerous mission of their existence. They would strike deep within enemy lines, and they would not stop until they had delivered the final blow to the Vrothian war effort. The odds were stacked against them, but the human spirit was not easily broken. As the fleet approached the Vrothian stronghold, every captain, pilot, and soldier knew that this was the moment that would decide the fate of both species. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was also an undeniable sense of determination. They had come this far, and they would see it through to the end. The battle would be brutal, and not all would make it out alive, but humanity's resolve was stronger than ever before. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain as they prepared for the final confrontation with the Vrothian Empire. The human fleet reached the heart of Vrothian space, their target looming ahead. The Vrothian command center was a massive fortress, surrounded by layers of defense that seemed impenetrable to most enemies. But humanity had learned from every battle, every skirmish, and every sacrifice they had made. Their tactics had been honed to perfection. The fleet moved in as a cohesive unit, each ship strategically placed to avoid detection and to maximize their chances of success. The Vrothians had fortified their defenses heavily, but the humans had spent months gathering intelligence and preparing for this very moment. They knew the enemy's weaknesses, and they intended to exploit them. The first wave of attacks came from the flanks, ships emerging from hidden positions and launching targeted strikes at the outer defenses of the Vrothian stronghold. The Vrothians, still caught off guard by humanity's relentless tactics, scrambled to respond. Their once pristine defensive lines were now in chaos as the human fleet pressed forward with unstoppable force. The second wave followed quickly, striking from a different angle, exploiting the gaps in the Vrothian defenses that had been exposed by the first attack. The human ships moved with lightning speed, using their superior agility and firepower to disrupt the enemy at every turn. It was an attack unlike any the Vrothians had ever faced, and they were struggling to adapt. Inside the Vrothian command center, panic began to set in. Their once invincible leaders, accustomed to being the masters of the galaxy, now found themselves fighting for their very survival. Their communication systems were compromised, and their fleets were scattered as the human forces tore through their outer defenses. Meanwhile, the human fleet pressed on, advancing toward the heart of the stronghold with every passing moment. They were getting closer to their objective. Their final strike would come soon, and it would change the course of the war forever. Humanity's ships fired relentlessly, their weapons cutting through the Vrothian armor with devastating precision. The Vrothian warships, now on the defensive, struggled to regroup and mount a counterattack, but the human fleet was too well coordinated. Their plan was unfolding exactly as they had hoped. The final phase of the attack began as the human fleet converged on the central core of the Vrothian stronghold. The defenses here were the most formidable, but humanity had saved its best tactics for this moment. They launched a coordinated assault on the heart of the base, overwhelming the remaining Vrothian forces with sheer force and overwhelming firepower. The battle raged fiercely, but the Vrothians were unable to hold their ground. Their stronghold, once the symbol of their dominance, was crumbling under the human assault with every explosion. The once impenetrable fortress was reduced to rubble. The Vrothians' last stand was quickly unraveling. In the final moments of the battle, Humanity's fleet delivered a devastating blow to the Vrothian command center. The heart of their war effort was torn apart, and the surviving Vrothian forces were left in disarray with their command structure decimated. The Vrothians no longer had the strength to resist. The human fleet withdrew from the wreckage. Victorious but exhausted, the battle had been fierce, and the cost had been high. But the war had been won. The Vrothians were no longer a threat to humanity's existence. The galaxy would never forget the rise of humanity from the ashes of destruction, and the determination that had driven them to triumph against an enemy that once seemed unstoppable. Humanity had proven that no matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would always fight back, and they would never give up. The dust had settled across the battlefield, but the war had left its marks. Humanity had emerged victorious, but the cost had been immense. The galactic landscape was forever altered, and the scars of the war would never fully fade. The fleet, battered and bruised, returned to Earth, where they were met with cheers and tears of relief. Humanity had fought back and won, but it was a victory tempered by the weight of all that had been lost. In the aftermath of the war, the leaders of humanity stood before their people, delivering a message that would resonate throughout history. They spoke not of the triumph of arms, but of the strength of the human spirit. They reminded the people of the devastation they had endured, of the sacrifices made, and of the families torn apart. But most importantly, they spoke of the unity that had brought them together to face their enemies. Humanity had learned that no matter the adversity, no matter how impossible the situation seemed, they would always find a way to rise above it. The war with the Vrothians had been a test, one that pushed them to the brink. But it also revealed the true potential of humankind. They were not a species destined for extinction, but one capable of overcoming the most insurmountable odds. In the days that followed, the human fleet began the long process of rebuilding the colonies that had been ravaged by the Vrothians. The destruction of Garrus was a painful memory, but it served as a reminder of the strength they had discovered within themselves. Humanity's victory had not only secured their survival, but also set the stage for a new era of exploration and cooperation among the stars. The Vrothians, having lost their war effort and their command structure, retreated to the fringes of the galaxy. They were broken, but not entirely destroyed. It was clear, however, that their empire would never recover from the defeat they had suffered. The once proud alien race had been humbled, and the galaxy now understood that no species, no matter how powerful, was invincible. In the years that followed, humanity began to expand its influence across the galaxy, forging new alliances with other species and civilizations that had once viewed them as a fragile, primitive race. But now, the humans were seen as equals, capable of standing toe-to-toe with the mightiest of empires. Their reputation as survivors, fighters, and allies spread far and wide, and they began to carve out their place in the galactic community. As time passed, the memory of the war began to fade, but the lessons learned remained. Humanity had grown stronger, more united, and more determined than ever before. They had faced extinction and had not only survived, but thrived. The universe now understood one simple truth: never underestimate humanity. The story of the war against the Vrothians became a legend, passed down through generations, a story of a species that refused to accept defeat, that rose from the ashes of destruction to become a force to be reckoned with. And as the humans looked toward the stars, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them with the same courage and resolve that had carried them through the darkest days of their history. Humanity had struck back, and they had proven that they were not just survivors, but warriors ready to face whatever the future had in store.